give you a little bio here of our commander, Lieutenant Commander of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, Commander-in-Chief. This is the second man from the top of the Sons. There's about 40,000 of us. With great privilege, am I able to give this to you. Mr. Kelly Barrow is a native of Georgia. He's a Georgian. Born in Atlanta, raised in the Tucker area. As a child, his interest in the war were influenced by the stories he heard from his parents and his grandparents. He attended DeKalb College and received a BS in military science, social studies from Shorter College in 1988. Kelly worked as a legislative aide in the Georgia General Assembly for 3 years. He obtained his master's degree in social studies, history, and education from Piedmont College and a BS in administration from the Lincoln Memorial University. He currently teaches social studies at Locust Grove High School, resides in Griffin, Georgia with his wife, Cassie, their 2 children, George and Hannah, and William. So with a great pleasure, I present to you Lieutenant Commander-in-Chief, Sons of Confederate Veterans, Kelly Barrow.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to tell you how much I appreciate you all having me to speak to your group. I've always enjoyed speaking to the United Daughters of the Confederacy, not because my wife's a member, my mom's a member, my grandmother, who just recently passed away, was a member, but because when I talk to the UDC or when I look at the UDC, I always feel that I'm speaking to the last vestige of the Old South, the gracious ladies that we hear, the ones that kept the home fires burning while the man waged the war, the one that raised the kids, the ones that after the war was over built the monuments to honor these men. They're the ladies that came up with the cross to give these men who received no medals, which obviously they did. And y'all are the ones that have bestowed upon all these things on these men. So when I speak to the UDC, I know that not everybody can become a member, and believe it or not, everybody wants to be a member. So when I see ladies in the UDC, I know that you have a passion in your heart about your ancestor and what they stood for, what they fought for, what they died for, and those that endured everything. I mean, you're in this organization because you love what it was all about and what you feel in your heart. And so I'm really excited, and I want to thank you again for having me. And we're up here talking, I know Cassie will agree with me. There was a lady at my church named Elaine Mangum. And I taught school with her. And everybody has a twin. And if you could come down to my church and you could, in Griffin, Georgia, this Walker here looks just like and talks like Elaine Mangum. So just to let you know that she has a twin. If you don't believe me, I'll send a picture of Mrs. Mangum up here. But it's been gracious because she's a gracious lady. And I've always enjoyed working with her and talking to her. So I just felt like today, I was really blessed today. But once again, I want to thank you all. And the meal was great. I hope you all enjoyed it. And the dessert, the cake was good. I understand you're going to become the official chef in the chapter.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
But it's an honor to be here. And so what I want to talk to you real quick is I have a speech prepared that I thought I would do just for this occasion. Here we are, 2013. Here it is, January. A lot of Confederates we all know was born, but the one that stands in our mind is Robert E. Lee. And a lot of states, you have Lee's birthday as a state holiday, or they have a Lee Jackson. And so it's appropriate that we honor those men that led our ancestors into battle. So, Madam President, with your permission, I'd like to proceed. It was a rainy night in September in 1870 that a reluctant man left his home for a vestris meeting at his church, Grace Episcopal. Even though he was reluctant, he felt that it was his duty to attend the meeting that he had been called upon to attend. Duty was the watchword of his life, and he would do his duty regardless of the circumstance or the situation that was arised. Who was this man of duty? It was Robert Edward Lee, who came to us on a cold January morning in 1807 at Stratford Hall in Virginia. This son was the son of Light Horse Harry Lee and Ann Hill Carter. And Robert E. Lee would have a major impact not on his family, not just his estate, but many generations to come, even today. When Robert E. Lee was 2 years old, his father was in prison for his debts, and he served a sentence. And I'm thinking, how much has changed? Because just imagine, if we all had to go to jail because of our debts, I think this might be an empty room. At least for me it would be. His father, who was serving time in jail because of his debts, was a former governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. He was a U.S. representative in the House in Washington. And he was also a major general that fought with George Washington. When he was 5 years old, Robert E. Lee, his father was nearly beaten to death for defending his friend's opposition to the War of 1812. Because General Lee felt, when I'm talking about Light Horse Harry Lee, felt that regardless of what people thought, this man had the right to say and print what he wanted, because that's what he fought for in the American Revolution. Well, he was so badly injured that he left his home for the Caribbean to recuperate, and when he finally had turned in 1818, he stopped at the plantation of Nathaniel Greene's widow on Cumberland Island and out on the coast of Georgia, and that's where Light Horse Harry Lee died and was buried for a number of years. And one of the last trips that Robert Lee made in August of 1870 was to Cumberland Island to see his father's resting place. Well, but Light Horse Harry will always be remembered for one thing, and that was his eulogy of Washington at the funeral. And I'm sure a lot of y'all remember the eulogy because it used to be required that everybody memorized it. Now, unfortunately today, as a school teacher, nobody does that. Does anybody know the eulogy? I'll give you a hint. First in war, first in peace, first in the hearts of this country. And that was what he was famous for. Now, when Robert E. Lee was 4 years old, he and his family had to leave Stratford Hall for their new home in Alexandria, Virginia. Before leaving, Robert E. Lee slipped away from his mom, just like all little boys do. If you don't believe me, you can ask Cassie. William back there likes to disappear on us. And where did Robert E. Lee went? He went back into his home. He went back into the nursery. You know the reason why? Y'all know the story? He went back into the nursery to say goodbye to his two angels there in the fireplace, in the brick, the fire brick in the fireplace. And if you've ever been to Stratford Hall, if you walk into the nursery, you have to bend down and you can see the two angels. Well, Robert E. Lee went in there to say goodbye. And I believe that Lee might have departed from his angels that day, but his angels never departed from him. Lee's spiritual foundation started as a young man, as a young boy, and came from a faithful and pious mom. And was a spiritual woman with high moral character, and she taught him well. She apparently knew that the pre-literary years are the most important in shaping a child's intellect and moral environment in the order of piety, in the order and piety of the Episcopal Church at the time shaped Lee's spiritual life. So Robert Lee's mom knew that when you get them young, you train them young, you teach them the Word of God, you pray for them, you bring them up in the right way, and that's what will happen. And of course, the Episcopal Church at the time shaped Robert Lee's life. And of course, we learned as parents that you teach them young and it stays with them. Lee learned by example and from his mom that he learned perseverance and duty. She taught him to worship God. She taught him to love the Bible and to practice prayer and to believe in God's divine oversight of everyday affairs of the believer. When he was older, this is what Lee said, and I quote, "All that I am, I owe to my mother." And I believe that a lot of moms would love to hear their children say, "I am what I am today because of my mom." And of course, the old saying is, "The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world." During the war, Lee never forgot his Christian beliefs and constantly encouraged worship and piety among his troops under his command. Lee approved days of fasting, prayer meetings, and issued orders about Sabbath observance. He was concerned not just for his men's welfare, but he was also concerned about their spiritual welfare and was very active in trying to secure Bibles for his men. A lot of people know this, but during the war, Bibles were contraband. And they couldn't hardly get them through the blockade. The Reverend J. Williams Jones, who wrote a book called Revival and Christ in the Camp, tells a conversation he had with Lee on the subject of tracts and Bibles. And I quote, "General Lee asked me if I ever had calls for prayer books among the soldiers. I told him that I frequently had, and he replied," this is General Lee, "Well, you would be greatly obliged me if you would call me at my quarters and get and distribute a few that I have. I bought a new one when I was in Richmond the other day, and upon saying that I would give my old prayer book, the one that he carried through the Mexican War, he had kept over the year, to some soldier, the bookseller offered to give him a dozen new ones for his old one. Well, Lee accepted the offer and thought it was a good offer, and Lee said, "Now I have 12 prayer books instead of one." And what did General Lee do? Well, what do you think he did? Reverend Jones goes on and says, "I called upon the appointed hour, and Lee had been called away from his quarters on some important matter. But he had, even in the midst of pressing cares and responsibilities, he left the prayer books with a member of his staff with directions concerning them. Each of them he had written in his own well-known handwriting, presented to blank by R.E. Lee." Now imagine a soldier, one of those 12 soldiers that got a prayer book. When he opened it up, he saw Robert Lee's name in it. And I've always wondered what happened to those prayer books, because either the soldiers probably died with them in their breast pocket, or someone's got it tucked away, because I guarantee you, if someone came forward with a prayer book with Robert Lee's name in it, people would be jumping up and down for it. Probably some auctioneer or eBay. Who knows? Lee's character Lee believed in God with a childlike faith and trust, and he used language of faith casually. Most of his private letters and military dispatches impressed the trust and confidence in God. Lee always acknowledged his dependence on an overruling providence. In the biography, Lee, the American, his biographer Gabriel Bradford writes, and I quote, "He repeats and repeats his invocation for God's blessings so often that we had to deal with an inexhaustible, and I cannot help adding, exasperating piety." End of quote. The Reverend William Smith White, pastor of Lexington Presbyterian Church, told of a conversation he had with Lee when he was president of Washington College. Now, if you know Lexington Presbyterian, this is where Stonewall Jackson was an elder, right across the street from one of the good restaurants they have up there. During the discussion, Lee said that he should be disappointed if the young man of the college did not become real Christians. He requested that Reverend White and the other pastors do all they could to accomplish their objective. And that objective was these men to know Christ. To further this goal, Lee made the building of a chapel on campus a priority. General Lee selected the site. He drew up the plans, since he was an engineer at West Point. And he would visit the site regularly to check on the progress. At its dedication in 1867, he regularly attended morning prayers and all other religious services held there unless he was presented by illness. And there was a certain spot that he sat in. And it wasn't in the back, it was in the front. Was Robert E. Lee a Christian? we ask? If Robert Lee was not a Christian, there was little hope anyone can claim the status. He displayed a Christ-like spirit when he prayed for his enemies and refused to refer them as such. His kindness and forbearance of the thoughts of others showed a deep humility. When it was necessary to chastise or correct a subordinate, Lee always showed respect for the diligent the dignity of the other man, pointing out his faults in the kindest way, and then putting the incident behind. And probably the most greatest one you can think of was the thing with Jeb Stewart in Gettysburg. Lee knew what happened, and he corrected Stewart in a way that I tried to correct my children. And I think it's a great role model. One of the biographers of Lee said, as a former newspaper editor, his name is Rodney Lee, he wrote a book on this a number of years ago. As a former newspaper editor and writer of countless short biographies, I searched diligently for a flaw in Lee's character. I found none. I cannot say that of any other person I read about or researched. I kept asking myself, why? What was his secret? His secret was that he found his source of his strength and commitment in Christ. Lee said it best when he says, and I quote, "I am nothing but a poor sinner, trusting in Christ alone for salvation." End of quote. Once Lee was approached by a woman who asked him to bless her newborn baby, and Lee did, along with the following advice. This is what Lee says: teach him that he must deny himself. Teach him he must deny himself. And that's what Christ told us. Jesus says, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. And this is what Lee did. He denied himself for others. It was Lee's sense of duty and Christian commitment that brought him to that vestures meeting that rainy night in late September of 1870. Lee's last words were this: strike the tent. They may have been the delirious thoughts of an old-tired soldier, but they were strangely in keeping with the Apostle Paul's thoughts as he compared our earthly bodies to a tent in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 1. And this is what the Apostle Paul wrote. Now we know that if the earthly tent we live in is destroyed, we have a building from God, an eternal house in heaven, not built by human hands. U.S. Senator and former Confederate Senator and floor leader for Jefferson Davis, Benjamin Harvey Hill from Georgia, said this in his tribute to General Robert Lee in 1874. And this is his tribute, and I quote, "When historians come to survey the character of Lee, he will find it rising like a huge mountain above the undulating plain of humanity. He must lift his eyes up high toward heaven to catch its summit. He possessed every virtue of other great commanders without their vices. He was a foe without hate, a friend without treachery, a soldier without cruelty, a victor without oppression, and a victim without murmuring. He was a public officer without vices, a private citizen without wrong, a neighbor without reproach, a Christian without hypocrisy, a man without guile. He was Caesar without his ambition, Frederick without his tyranny, Napoleon without his selfishness, Washington without his reward. He was obedient to authority as a servant and royal in authority as a true king. He was gentle as a woman in life, modest and pure as a virgin in thought, watchful as a Roman veterans in duty, and submissive to the law as Socrates, and grand in battle as Achilles." End quote. Perhaps I find the most fitting tribute paid to Robert Lee is the inscription at the base of the resurrection window, which dominates the front of the sanctuary at R.E. Lee Memorial Episcopal Church in Lexington, Virginia. And it says, "Robert Lee, numbered in thy saints and glory everlasting. So today, we honor Robert E. Lee. And we can learn so much from Lee and where he got his strength from his commitment in Christ. And Lee, with all that is out there today, Lee still remains a great role model for us and other generations to come, and for our children. And so, let us take the thoughts of Lee and the example that he leaves with us and share with others. In a world that has grown darker and darker, it's great to know that we have role models, such as Robert E. Lee. But we have to think about who Robert E. Lee's greatest role model was, and that was Christ Jesus. And whatever role model you can have besides that, I do not know. But, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for having me. And is there anything we can ever do for you in your chapter? Feel free to let us know. But we love coming to this party. I tell you, you got beautiful country up here. Don't ever let the Yankees come in and destroy it and ruin it. When I had to come up to Harrogate when I was working on my specialist degree, and show that God's got a sense of humor because He's sitting in the Lincoln Memorial. We had to stay in Middlesbrough and drive through the tunnel, and we used to just fascinated about how beautiful this country was. And I guess what the crowning blow was is that when I graduated, we had to wait for my mom to fly into Maryville. And Cassie and I, before we had kids, we went into the mall, and while we were in the mall, we realized that this mall is different from the other malls we're used to. It was like stepping back into time. I mean, it really was. And we still talk about it today. But you got beautiful country up here, and we like coming to this part. So if you ever need us for anything, just let us know. If you give me your address, I'll give you those recipes. And we'll send you some more. We got Cassie's Confederate Cherry Pie. We got Georgiana's Ginger Cakes. And we got William's Whiskey Cake. But once again, I want to thank y'all, and I ask the God of Jacob, that we love so much, that He'll bless you and bless your family, and y'all have a wonderful January, and just remember our great heroes, and y'all just keep on doing what you're doing up here, and keep home fires burning, keep teaching the truth. And if you have any questions on anything, I'm always here to help you out, and I'm going to sit down now and finish some tea. So thank you very much.
He distinguished himself in his advance from almost at the very bottom of his class in preparation and knowledge to close to the top. And had there been one more year of study, the general consensus is that he would have been first in his class. Afterwards, he traveled in Europe. He was a very civilized and comprehensively studious had a fellow interested in history of all kinds. His travels in Europe were significant in that he wasn't just after a good time in rowdy Paris, but he saw museums, battlefields, all evidences of art over the decades, and came back a very comprehensively educated gentleman. He became a professor at the Virginia Military Institute. I think you all know his legends of being disliked by his students. He would appear and give a lecture. If he was thrown off balance by a question, he would start the lecture all over again. So that's difficult to learn, and his students were very critical of him, but after the war began, those students distinguished themselves in the subjects of artillery that he particularly focused on. So there must have been something good about his instruction. During the war, he first became, to the public's general attention, at the Battle of First Manassas, where early in the war, this battle went back and forth most of the day, and Jackson's arrival with fresh troops holding the high ground was a decisive factor. And against assaults by the Bluebellies, he held his ground, and the General B at the time called out to rally his own troops. There stands Jackson like a stone wall. Rally behind the Virginians, boys. And they did so, swept the field. The Yankees descended to Washington, the Washington races, in great disorder. After that, Jackson had further distinction in his work in the Valley, in the campaign that he followed himself. He cleared the Valley of the Yankees and, swept the area clean. Further on, he was extraordinarily competent as a lieutenant commander under General Lee's leadership. He did great work at Battle of Second Manassas, particularly at Fredericksburg also, and at Chancellorsville, his most glorious moment, perhaps, in his military career. He divided his forces, swept the Yankees from their flank, and was unfortunately wounded when he was accidentally shot late in the evening by his own men. He succumbed to those wounds at Guinea Station just a few days later. All this is well known. He was a very faithful, committed, and devout Christian. As a Presbyterian, he believed strongly in predestination. It was his thought that he was on this earth at God's pleasure. When he was called, he would leave according to God's will. So there was no use trying to hide from shot and shell. He could stand up, and if he was going to be hit, he was going to be hit, and that was it. So he trusted the Lord. The Lord looked favorably upon him until Chancellorsville. His legacy, I think, is profound. His military expertise is well recognized. His competence as a commander led to a widespread appreciation, both here in the North even, and internationally. Since then, his reputation has only grown. He was described by Dr. Douglas Freeman at the dedication of the wonderful Lee Jackson twin statue in Wyman Park in Baltimore as America's greatest combat team. He was a profound influence upon all of us. When he died and was laid to rest in Lexington, the second national flag, the stainless banner, was the first official occasion that banner was used to cover the casket. A wonderful gentleman, a profound fighter, a combat chieftain, a leader of uncounted distinction. So for those, I'm pleased to commend to you the study of General Stonewall Jackson. Thank you.
The life of Robert E. Lee, what he meant to the Confederacy, what he meant to the cause, and I think the one thing that stands out always in my mind anytime somebody mentions Robert E. Lee is there was ever an example of a true, honorable Christian man. There's never been a better example. And I know all of you have probably seen several movies made about him, and I think it's significant that, thank goodness, they have showed him in as good a light as the movie crowd can in this day and time. But one thing that sticks out about General Lee was he was always, forever a gentleman. And he always and forever trusted Christ and God to guide him. And to me, one of the greatest pictures I've ever seen of General Lee is where somebody I know is a painting, but I'm sure it happened many times, is when he would kneel to pray before a battle and ask God's guidance on what was about to happen, to give him wisdom to do the best. And for a commander to be able to take the small group that he had, underfed, underarmed, in most cases walked and traveled miles and miles, and to hold off the whole Yankee hordes that he did with such supreme tactics as he often used, that just blew some of them's mind up north trying to find him and whip him. To be able to continue the struggle for 4 years is just, anybody you read that writes about him, to them, if they're military minded, what General Lee done was just out of this world. And even in defeat, he was still an officer and a gentleman and an honorable man. He did not turn to bitterness or any of the other things that you would think he could have. And I think for that reason, he is probably the greatest figure of the Confederate Army that there is. I'm glad that I know about him. I hope a lot of children get to know about him, because let me throw this out there on his behalf. Not long ago, somebody, and I know the boys from my camp have heard this story before, I was given a history book out of a school system somewhere near here. A fella gave it to me to read, and I took it home and threw it aside. I've got books galore anyway. So a few weeks later, he asked me if I had read that book, and I said no. He said, well, please look at the part on the Civil War. And now this is an American history book. It was they're trying to push into the public school system. The opening phrases of that Civil War part of that history book said, Robert E. Lee was the general who led an insurrection against the government of the United States. Now that is what's been thrown in our schools, people. But luckily this book, I don't think got accepted at that time, but I'm sure it was brought right back again the next year to try to push down some of the educators' throats, so to speak. And how in the world, I threw that book incidentally about as far as you can throw anything. There's nothing any more desecrating than to read words like that about a man that great.
Thank you. You can be a member of both, and that's okay. And I encourage you to do that. It was a great luncheon, good camaraderie, and it was just, we had a great time. The kids had a great time, and so I encourage you to be a part of that organization, as you're probably husbands or members of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. If you're not a member of this organization, I suggest you join with all my heart. It's a great organization. I've been in it ever since I can remember, and I'm proud to be a member of the organization. It's the greatest organization behind the church. I'll say that with all my heart. But it's great to be up here. I tell you, probably, I don't know if it was the first time I came up here. I'm trying to get my memory correct. Probably not. If you know that God's got a sense of humor, if you don't know that, then I'll tell you why. Because, I was born and bred a Confederate and raised all my life hearing stories from my grandma and on both sides, since their grandfathers were Confederate soldiers. But when I got my specialist degree, which is my degree before I started working on my doctorate, he decided that he'd send me to Lincoln Memorial University. Now I went to Harrigan, and I can remember going up there once a month and complaining about not driving, just gas was $1.32, and thought it was kind of high. That was back in 2004 or 5. A lot has changed, hasn't it? But I knew how beautiful the country was, especially going there. I'd spend the night in Middlesbrough and drive through the tunnel, and it was just beautiful country. And when I graduated, and my mom flew in from Virginia to watch me graduate, we had to go down to Maryville to pick her up. My wife and I, before Georgiana came, we were in the mall there, and we thought, wow, this mall's different than all the other malls we've been into. It's really nice. Y'all got a good thing up here. Don't let it go wrong. And of course, came up here and talked to the Jonesboro camp, and just a nice drive, taking 26 through, and y'all got beautiful country up here. I like Middle Tennessee because I have to go to Elm Springs every once in a while to do some stuff, and We like the rolling hills. You get over to East Tennessee, it's really nice. Just don't let the Yankees find out about it, because if they come, they might change some stuff around. In Georgia, we call them halfbacks. They go and come to Florida, and when they leave Florida, they stop in North Georgia in the mountains, and they stay there, and then head back down to Florida during the summertime. But it's a beautiful country up here. We enjoy coming up here, and I'll just say this: I served as your Army commander, and it was a privilege to serve, and I'm glad all the camps are here tonight. And I'll just tell you that, and I've always said this before, regardless of what position I hold in the Sons of Confederate Veterans, if you ever need me for anything, speaker, wherever it might be, I do not mind traveling. My wife and kids don't mind. I'm here to help you out. My wife, she also speaks too. If you ever need a speaker, she'll be glad to speak. My daughter Georgiana speaks. Sometimes we don't know what she talks about, but she'll talk your ears off sometimes. Isn't that right, Pumpkin? But it's an honor to be here tonight. I have a lot to talk about, and a lot to share, and so if you'll just bear with me on some things, I'm hoping that you'll walk away with here with something that you can learn something. As a teacher, as an educator, I try to impart something I'm passionate about. And I know in this day and time, I can tell you that schools, I've been teaching for 16 years, and things have changed a lot in the last 16 years, not like it used to be. But I still try to impart something to my students. And it's difficult, but I try. So with y'all, we're all in the same mind. Laurel and Hardy, Heckle and Jekyll, Batman and Robin, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, and Bo and Luke Duke. All these combinations have something in common. Always there for each other. Something you can look up to, their talent, God-given ability where they make you laugh, make you cry, fighting for good, watching them do their thing. Tonight, we're here to celebrate two other people. We're here to celebrate Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jonathan Jackson. These men, or team, were an unforgettable pair. Their command combination and were spectacular, and even after 150 years, their style is still talked about in military colleges, not just in the United States, but over in other places throughout the world, and they're still taught with reverence and awe. You cannot mention one without talking about the other. It's just impossible. And many people believe to this very day that had Stonewall Jackson not have died, we'd be living in a free and independent country today. Amen. Southerners pay homage to these famed generals in various ways. That includes the publishing of biographies, essays, songs, the composition of poems, I heard one today, the creation of statues, the naming of buildings, even schools, songs, highways, even state holidays. In Georgia, we have Robert E. Lee's birthday, which is celebrated the day after Thanksgiving. You have names of pets and cars. I'm sure you can think of a famous car named after a general. Even the christening of children in their honor. And of course, attending events like tonight. From the time Lee and Jackson began operating together in the spring of '62 until Jackson's death, they set an unprecedented record of military successes against seemingly overwhelming odds. But what made them great? That's what I want to talk about tonight. What made them great? Jackson and Lee shared a lot of many things, many elements they shared. One was their heritage, their allegiance to not just their state, but to their master and Lord. Both were Virginians, but both came from two different Virginia societies. Robert E. Lee, Robert Edward Lee, his ancestors signed the Declaration of Independence. His father was a a general, served under George Washington. He was governor, member of Congress, and probably the most famous thing he's famous for was a eulogy he gave at Washington's funeral. The one that students used to memorize in schools. And I'm sure a lot of y'all were taught to memorize the eulogy at Washington's funeral. I know I was, and I still remember it. And my children will remember it when I start teaching them. Y'all remember Light Horse Harry Lee standing up and saying, "First in war, first in peace, first in the hearts of his countrymen." His mom, Robert E. Lee's mom, Ann Hill Carter, came from a wealthy Virginia family. So wealthy that her great-grandfather was known as King Carter because of all the acres of land and influence they had from Virginia. They go way back. General Lee's father struggled for a time with all this fame and all the stuff that he preceded. He lost the money and he went into debt. And he went into prison. This is back in the days when you had debt, you went to prison. Now, I'm pretty sure that if we had debt today, a lot of us wouldn't be in here, would we? But his father served his sentence and came back, and his father was injured by defending a friend's right to free press and free speech because his friend was against the war against Britain in 1812, and Robert E. Lee had to leave the country because of his injuries. Richard Henry Lee. Light Horse Harry Lee had to leave and go to the Caribbean, and he came back in 1818 and died at the home of Nathaniel Greene's widow in Cumberland Island off the coast of Georgia. That is Lee's family. Stonewall Jackson, something a little bit different. Plain stock, born in the western part of Virginia, which is still known as the western part of Virginia today. The rugged terrain helped him be the man that he was. His father died when he was 2. His mom died when he was 7. He was orphaned and raised by relatives. He worked hard and met adversity head on. Some people say that Stonewall Jackson pulled himself up by his bootstraps. The struggle he faced and the obstacles he overcame is reflected in his great motivational axiom, "You may be whatever you resolve to be." And that still stands today. If I were to send you an email from my school, that's underneath my name, I have that as my logo, my slogan, whatever it might be, because that's why I try to teach in my classroom to my students, that you may be whatever you resolve to be, regardless of where you come from, what you face in life, whatever happens to you, you can be whatever you want to be. And if you go to VMI today, you still see it. They are posted. As you know, Jackson, at the age of 18, was appointed to the United States Military Academy. Both Lee and Jackson went to West Point. Lee, going to West Point, he was well prepared. He made good grades. He was second in his class without demerits. His senior year, he was the adjutant of the Corps Cadets. Very prestigious position to hold at that time. He was called by other cadets the Marble Model. The Marble Model. Imagine being a cadet and other people calling you the Marble Model. Jackson was ill prepared. He had to be tutored while he was at West Point by future General, Confederate General, William W.C. Whiting. And when he graduated in the class of 46, he was in the top third. Both Lee and Jackson went off to the Mexican War together. They both served, and this is where they first met. Jackson was a second lieutenant in the 1st U.S. Artillery. He was brevetted twice, once as a second lieutenant, or first lieutenant, I should say, and a major. He received citation after citation from his superiors and earned more promotions than any other officer during that war. At the Battle of Chapultepec, he won the day and received the praise of his commanding officer, General Winfield Scott, at a celebratory banquet in Mexico City. It was said that, and I quote, "No greater compliment could have been paid a young officer for courage and zeal." End of quote. Lee, on the other hand, in his service in the Mexican War, he served as an engineering officer that he learned at West Point. he served on General Scott's staff. He carried out reconnaissance. He positioned artillery, and that's where he met Stonewall Jackson at the time. He guided the assault columns. He offered tactical suggestions, which made Scott's army a model of military effectiveness. Scott would later write the following about his successes in Mexico. It was, and I quote Scott writing, largely due to the skill and valor and undaunted energies of Robert Edward Lee, end of quote. He was the, and I quote again, he was the very best soldier I've ever seen in the field, end of quote. Scott will remember that, especially when 1861 rolls around. Later, Scott told his friend, and I quote, I tell you, if I were on my deathbed tomorrow, and the president should tell me that a great battle was about to be fought for the liberty or slavery of the country, and ask for my judgment as to the ability of a commander, I would say, with my dying breath, let it be Robert E. Lee. Scott was good with his word because when Lincoln planned an illegal and a justified invasion of the Confederate States, Scott recommended Robert E. Lee. Fortunately, and rightly, Robert Lee turned it down. And I knew that Scott was very disappointed. Scott's influence on the military capability of Lee and Jackson were immense. Lee and Jackson's military or combat experience with Scott's refined reinforcements in their minds laid the principles of warfare, along with a deep appreciation of his personal leadership and qualities and the originality of many of his military competencies. He saw demonstrated in Fire and Blood, and the advantages of the audacity and seizure of the initiative, the imperative of careful reconnaissance before committing to action, the supreme valor, the value of turning movement and flanking and envelopments and tactical maneuvers, the need for proper logistics arrangements such as moving supplies and being mobile of troops to support the actual combat operations, and the sometimes necessities of bending one's line of communication in order to reach the rear of the enemy. Scott was a war mentor for these men. And see, what's going to happen is that what Scott taught them, Lee and Jackson are going to use in the war for Southern independence. So we can think that. Lee and Jackson in their religion were both motivated with their relationship with Christ. Lee was an Episcopalian. He was taught piety and Scripture by his mom. And Lee said himself, I am all that I am because of my mother. He read Scripture daily. He prayed for his enemies, and he prayed daily. His relationship with Christ was above all things, and he thought his salvation was important enough to share it with other people, and it was deeply in his heart that he shared salvation, and he taught salvation. Lee said, I am nothing but a poor sinner, and I'm saved by the grace of Christ. Jackson, he had many different religious pilgrimages. He started out as Episcopalian. He was baptized. He flirted with the Catholic Church while he was in Mexico, and he finally settled being a Presbyterian. So he went from an Armenian to a Calvinist. He became a deacon and later an elder at Lexington Presbyterian Church. He embraced the teachings of Christ and sought God's will in all things. He shared the gospel with anybody and everybody. And he even started a black Sunday school that existed way after his death. And people were saved in that congregation, and it's still honored today with a stained glass window in the church in Lynchburg, which says, let us cross the river and rest under the shades of the trees. When I read the story of Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee, I think of the Cavaliers and the Puritans, the Roundheads and the Royalists, if you ever studied the English Civil War. And I believe with all my heart that Lee represents the Cavalier, the gallant man with the big plumes on their helmets or hats, and Jackson represents the Puritan, zeal and just ready to go. But you know what? Regardless of how we look at it, both of these men were dedicated to Christ Jesus to the very end of their life. After the Mexican War, well, both went into the field of education, military education. People forget that Robert E. Lee was the superintendent at the United States Military Academy. And Stonewall Jackson became a professor at VMI, where he taught natural experience and philosophy there. Robert E. Lee, a lot of people know this, he wasn't thrilled about being the superintendent. He tried to change his orders, but you know what? It didn't work out, so you know what he did? He did his duty, and he did it with a gracious heart. And he was described by the cadets there as a model, a marble model. And he was very human, kind and calm, and definite in all that he did. He was defined. Jackson, as we already heard, when he taught his lessons by memorization. And he lectured, and when he lectured in a high, monotone tone. And to his students, they nicknamed him Old Jack or Tom Fool. Now, here's one thing that people don't talk about, is that when it came to slavery, both of these men had something in common. They knew that they did not agree with it, but they knew that the institution didn't lay with them, it lay with an almighty, powerful, sovereign God. And there's a reason for everything. And I talked earlier today about Romans 8:28. If you know that everything happens in God's will. He's not sitting on his throne and didn't know what was going on. He knows everything. And when it came to that, they looked at this as that this was in God's hands, and all they could do is just share the gospel and get these people saved, and because they're all the children of God, and many people were saved because of what they believed in. Now, when it came to the extreme, the abolitionists, both of them looked at the abolitionists as bigoted and dangerous. And their doctrines were fanatical because they invited insurrection and bloodshed. And we all know that's not Christian. Jackson said the abolitionists were godless men. And they were seeking to somehow abort the will of the Almighty and force their own will using the name of God. I'm sure we've probably heard that somewhere today in this time. Both played a part in John Brown's raid. Both there were at his hanging. Lee commanded and led the capture, or part of the capture, while Jackson commanded the artillery position and the detail of the VMI cadets that provided security for John Brown's hanging. Now, when it came to secession, Lee and Jackson both loved their state because their state was their home. When Lincoln called for the illegal invasion of Virginia, both men drew their swords, not for Lincoln, but they drew their swords in defense of Virginia. Lee became a major general in the Virginia forces, and Stonewall Jackson became a colonel in the volunteers. When Virginia joined the Confederate States, Robert E. Lee became Jefferson Davis' military advisor, and I can tell you he did a lot better job than Braxton Bragg. And Stonewall Jackson became a brigadier general of what was become known as the Stonewall Brigade. In 1862, Lee became a full general. And when General Joseph E. Johnston was wounded, Lee was there at the right place at the right time, because that's just the way God had it planned. And Lee took command. After the Battle of Seven Pines, or I should say 7 days, the Confederates had swept the Yankees from the field, saving Richmond from the day. And from this day on, Jackson and Lee would work together. And Jackson would follow Lee blindly, and whatever Lee told him to do, he would do it. And Lee entrusted Jackson with any mission, regardless of how daring or how difficult. And this is crucial, what Robert E. Lee did at the battle of 7 days. Because if you think about it, had the Yankees captured the capital, the war might have been over because they already lost Shiloh and Fort Henry and Fort Donelson. And so Robert Lee came and saved the day, and there it was. General George S. Patton, when he talked about the combination of how Lee and Jackson worked, and talked about how Lee could just tell Jackson what to do, this is what he says. Patton says, "Never tell a subordinate how to carry out an order. Just give him the order and leave the details to him. That is good commanding. Just tell somebody to do it and let him do it." And that's what Lee did, and that's what Jackson did in the Valley Campaign, and which is still studied today. Confederate victory in the Army of Northern Virginia from that time on would be legendary and would always just stagger the Union's morale. Think about it. Every time they got together, they defeated the Union. Lee and Jackson had qualities of an extraordinary team. So it goes back to the question asker, what made them great? Well, they both possessed superior intellect. Their superiority was demonstrated throughout their careers. Their mental superiority enabled them to analyze the mood and the anticipation, the moves of their opponents, and both Lee and Jackson took advantage of their God-given insight. Both of them displayed other characteristics that is essential to good generalship, and that is audacity. They showed an extraordinary willingness to take a calculated risk in battle. It has been said that the boldness directed by a predominating intelligence is the mark of a hero. A member of Lee's staff said that Lee's name was audacity. Jackson said of Lee's boldness, that he never took counsel with fear. I would say with all my heart that the world will never see two bolder soldiers than Robert Lee and Stonewall Jackson. Their final characteristic, I would say, about Lee and Jackson is character. Something that we definitely need in this country today is character. And something that people look to us, the Sons of Confederate Veterans, is character. And look for the South, character. It is said that character is a quality that is elusive and indefinable. The quality that lights the moral flame of leadership. A quality that is best spoken of in terms of mysterious and Rasputical. The attribute that is found in Lee and Jackson come from their relationship with Jesus Christ. That's what it comes down to. Both of these men sought the will of God and constantly called upon Him in prayer and in song. And with God's help, nothing is impossible. The examples in the character of Lee and Jackson give us hope here today. And give us hope for other people who are looking for hope. In a world that we live in that seems to grow darker every day, there is hope. And that comes from the same hope that Lee and Jackson had, and that is the hope of Jesus Christ. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't have to tell you what the future is like. I know you can turn on the television and see things. I know you can see how the world is changing. And let me just say this. Winston Churchill, after the war was over, defeating fascism that we never thought would come again, he said, the hope in the world lies in the West, and the hope of the West lies in the United States. Well, I'll take it a little bit further that I got from past Commander-in-Chief Chris Sullivan. He says the hope of the United States lies on the South. And let me tell you, the hope of the South relies on the Sons of Confederate Veterans. And I'll say it relies on the United Daughters of the Confederacy. And I will say it relies on the children of the Confederacy, which my son and daughter are members of. You know, ladies and gentlemen, as we move forward in the sesquicentennial, we, the Sons of Confederate Veterans, the United Daughters of the Confederacy, the Order of the Confederate Rose, and the Children of the Confederacy need to come together and stand together against those who attempt to destroy things that we love and hold dear. Make no mistake. Make no mistake. That is their mission. There's people out there that hate us. They hate our flag. They hate our ancestors. They hate our monuments. They hate our headstones. They hate everything that's Confederate. You name it. If you don't believe me, just look at the paper. Things that you would never think would happen to our ancestors or whatever it might be would be gone. So you know what we need to do? We need to focus on what our ancestors focused on. We need to rally to the colors that our ancestors did 150 years ago. Whether it's the 3rd National, 2nd National, the stainless banner, the battle flag, the Christian cross, the cross of St. Andrew, or the 1st National flag of the Confederacy. Regardless of what you use, you need to rally the colors and meet the enemy the same way your ancestors did. Make them proud of you during this time. But most importantly, do it to set an example for your children, your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren to follow. I hope you will join me in this struggle as we show the world that the South was right. That the South is right now, the South was right then, and I promise you, the South will be right still 50 years from now, 100 years from now. And we always know the South is right, period. So remember this and let it burn in your heart. Not just in your heart, but in your mind and your soul, and share it with somebody. We're all here because we love our Confederate flag. We're all here because we love our Confederate ancestors. And you think of what they did, what they suffered at Petersburg, or the retreat from Nashville. And they gave all. And so all we can do is do the same thing with the DNA that runs through our body, is to defend them, whether it's a logo on our car, or at a school, or in a cemetery. You know, stand tall, stand firm, and your ancestors will be proud. So with that saying, and as I end it, all I have to say to you is, may the God of Jacob bless you. May the God of Jacob bless the great state of Tennessee and Virginia. May the God of Jacob bless the Tennessee Division and its leadership and give them the wisdom they lead their men as they grow and move forward. And may God bless the Sons of Confederate Veterans, and may God bless the South. Thank you. Amen.